everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Momo. How are you all doing today? Last week I made a video where I reflected about my artistic growth, and in that video I mentioned my views on art style. Mainly my belief that you shouldn't get too worried about it, since boxing yourself into a singular art style can actually prevent you from growing. Still, I understand why young artists want a way to find out their unique art style. It's our way to express ourselves, so it's normal that we wish it to be super unique. The way you develop your own art style is by combining everything that inspires you. Other art styles, themes, and techniques. So today, I'm going to do the 5 art style challenge, where I take a few of the art styles that inspired me the most and try to replicate them. We'll be doing my own, Sailor Moon, manga version, Witch Hat Atelier, Toilet-bound Hanako-kun, manga version, and Studio Ghibli. Stick around to see the final results! Let's start with my art style so we can have something to compare the others to. I wanted to use one of my OCs from my bunny face project because I absolutely adore them. At first I wanted to draw Hazel, the little girl in the bunny mask, but I quickly realized that the way I draw her would not translate well to other styles. Hazel wears a mask, so realistically, she would not be able to emote. But I don't like that, so she still emotes by pure cartoon logic. The styles I chose for today don't usually do that, so I ended up going for her sister Kanel, the only character that has a visible human face. If you were to ask me to describe my style, I'd say it's a mix of cartoon with anime. The eyes are usually the anime looking part, while the rest is very cartoony. I usually go with chibi proportions. Characters usually only have 4 fingers. I use shapes for noses as well. The use of shapes for noses isn't evident in Kanel because Kanel actually has a little bunny nose, but it's more common in other types of characters. There was a time where my art leaned on this shape for noses a lot, to the point where my drawings kinda reminded me of the Muppets. I might actually go back to do something similar eventually because I absolutely love the Muppets and Sesame Street's art direction. I think the creation of the ARG Welcome Home definitely brought back a lot of that love for puppets. Aside from that, my art style is rather simple. I usually don't over-design. Too many details in a character causes more trouble than good. When I do the line art, there is a little bit more detail because I do a lot of hatching on clothing and hair. I use a lot of gradients on my flat colors to give the flats a little more interest. I use cell shading because it's faster and more fun than rendering. But at the end, I usually add a few blues and green tones over the shadows to give it a bit of color variation. That way, the shading doesn't look flat and boring. And finally, I always color the inside of the line art with a darker version of the flat color. Because I think solid black line art can be very harsh, and with the colored lines it looks a lot softer without losing the clarity of black lines. Overall, my art style is very soft, round, and comforting. The first style I'm replicating is Sailor Moon, the manga version. I really wanted to do Sailor Moon not because it's a big influence on my current art, but because it was one of my biggest inspirations growing up. Sailor Moon was the first manga I ever bought for myself. I remember seeing it in my local bookshop a lot when I was younger, but I only got around to buying it when I was 14 years old, mainly due to language barriers. Nowadays, it's a lot more common to see manga translated into Portuguese, but back then, all the manga was in English, which I only started to be a little more fluent at around 14. At the time, manga was also very rare, so I actually got volume 2 because that was the earliest one they had. Naoko Takeuchi's art is so beautiful. It's this mix of gracious and cuteness, and the style is also very fashion-oriented. A lot of the Sailor Scouts dresses are based on high fashion dresses of the time. The iconic Princess Serenity dress is a good example of that. I'd say the eyes are the most iconic part of the style because despite being similar to the shoujo art style of the time, it's still very much unique, in a way that I can't quite describe. I had a bit of trouble drawing in this style for a few reasons. The line weight was one of them. Sailor Moon's art style has these very thin and delicate lines, while I usually draw with a thicker line with more line weight variation. I actually do that because I find it more comfortable. I have a very heavy hand and I usually put a lot of pressure on the pen, especially if I'm trying to draw clean lines. And I find that when I use thin lines, I usually put more pressure, which after an hour or so of drawing ends up hurting my hand quite a bit. The second issue was Kanel's skin tone. I wanted to replicate Sailor Moon's colored illustrations, so I rendered everything like a Copic illustration. I wanted it to be as close as I could to the original style. However, Naoko Takeuchi doesn't usually draw black people. The darkest character I could find was Sailor Pluto, but in the colored illustration, Sailor Pluto is just barely tanner than the other Sailor Scouts, so I had to improvise a little. Lack of racial diversity is always a bit of an issue when it comes to older anime/manga, unfortunately, but I still think I did a pretty good job. I'm overall pretty proud of this one. Witch Hat Atelier is a style widely different from my own, but it's surprisingly one of my biggest influences. Witch Hat Atelier is a manga series by Kamome Shirahama about Coco, a little girl that wishes to become a witch. However, she was not born in a witch family, meaning that she really doesn't know how to become one. As a child, she was sold a vial of ink, a pen, and a notebook with the promise that she would become a witch. But for many years, she wasn't able to understand how that could help her. One day, she meets the witch Quifri. Coco goes against his wishes and witnesses Quifri cast a magic spell. At that moment, she realizes that magic isn't born with the user, but it's drawn. She rushes to a room and starts to replicate the symbols in the notebook she was sold, unknowingly casting forbidden spells that would eventually petrify her mother. Quifri ends up taking Coco in as an apprentice to teach her spells in the hopes to find the witch that sold her the notebook and find a way to save her mother. I love this manga. I love that it's about witches, I love that in this story art is magic, I love it. Witch Hat Atelier is a beautiful story with an equally beautiful art style. Shirahama's art style is very clearly inspired by early illustration prints, usually done with lithography techniques, vintage illustrations of classic fairy tales, religious art, as well as other comic artists, such as Moebius. It's incredibly detailed and full of passion. I admire Shirahama's art very much. I've done multiple style studies before, so drawing Kanel in this style was pretty easy. I probably had the most fun detailing Kanel's braids. Coloring was also surprisingly simple, probably because most of the hatching already takes care of most of the shading. I'm really proud of this one. I think I got pretty close. Like I mentioned before, Witch Hat Atelier is one of my biggest inspirations, not in the form, but in technique. This series was probably the main reason I started to take so much care on my line art and started to add hatching wherever needed. One of my favorite manga of all time is Toilet-bound Hanako-kun. This story was basically made for me. Cute art, romance, ghosts, and urban legends with horror on the side. What more can you want in a story? I'm going to be honest, in this particular series I'm mainly a manga reader. I haven't gotten around to watching the anime, but from what I've seen they actually changed the art style a little. And here's the thing, I know that animated work will never look just like the manga. It's just not feasible. It will always look a little different, and I accept that. But I still prefer the manga art, so that's the style I'm replicating today. Just like Witch Hat Atelier, this style is very influential on my art, so I've done multiple studies on this art style as well. Actually, I might love this one even more since I got out of my way to get my hands on one of the art books. The art style is very cute. AidaIro usually go with more chibi-like proportions with adults being at most 6 heads tall. Despite this, the drawings are very detailed with realistic hands and detailed shading. The hair is usually very sharp with lots of rectangular and triangular shapes. The shading is very warm, usually very orangey with a few touches of light purple, blue or green to give the shading more interest. They also color the lines in a few spots to soften the line art a bit. By that description alone, I think it's obvious where I take my coloring from. In my personal art style, I still haven't decided on how much detail I want to give to the iris of the eye. So it usually changes from drawing to drawing. AidaIro's art, on the other hand, shines on the detail they give to the eyes of the characters. Every character has their unique eye shape and unique way of detailing the eye. Nene's eyes, for example, are very different from Ko's or Hanako's. Even characters that theoretically would have the same eyes have different detailing on the iris, like for example Hanako and Tsukasa. I think I did a good job replicating this style, so much so that I might actually integrate more of AidaIro's drawing and coloring style into my art. And finally, we're finishing off this challenge with Studio Ghibli. Now, Ghibli is influential to me in a more indirect way. I love the narratives Ghibli brings to the table, as well as their contemplative philosophy. To be honest, I should learn more from Ghibli's art, specifically their line economy. But where they influence me more is in their animation style. This is how they have these stylized characters that are animated in a very grounded way. Yes, I do animation. I don't usually share it here, but I do, and I honestly love doing it. I also wanted to draw this Ghibli art style because, to be frank, I'm really annoyed by all the Ghibli AI art. Generative images are always annoying to see online, in my opinion, but it's even more annoying when the style is so easy to replicate. The Ghibli art style is purposefully simple because it's an animation style. You might not get it right first try, but if you study it a little, you'll get the hang of it really fast. Not to mention Miyazaki's views on AI, of course. This trend must have been a slap to the face, especially when his art is so clearly done with passion and sincerity. Drawing Kanel in this style was very fun. I think I used a Totoro screenshot for the reference, but to be honest, my favorite movie is probably Ponyo. I know Ponyo is not everyone's favorite, but this movie makes me so happy in a way that only Ghibli movies can. There is a certain sincerity in these movies, as well as a great respect for the audience's intelligence, regardless of age, that unfortunately is not very common. At the end of the day, I think that's what makes Ghibli so special. They have a very specific and beautiful philosophy when crafting their stories. I think I did it justice, but what do you think? And that's all I have for today. If you want to help out the channel, consider joining channel memberships where you get to see sneak peeks for my videos, my personal projects, exclusive emojis and loyalty badges, as well as getting your name shouted out at the end of the videos just like this. Thank you to Sunny's Art in the Sky for supporting the channel. Your support means the world. If you want to see more stuff from me, I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at momopurin_chan, on Kara at momopurin, and on Blue Sky at momopurin-chan. Thank you so much, and until next time,